Indira Gandhi, the Iron Lady of India, served as the first woman Prime Minister of India from 1966 to 1977 and later also for over 4 years starting from 1980. Her indomitable leadership left an indelible mark on the psyche of the entire nation. Indira Gandhi basked in the intense glorification and adulation of the common man who worshipped her as Durga, the invincible, and was haunted by the public anger and resentment when she unleashed a reign of terror during the infamous emergency of 1975. Her subsequent humiliating downfall in the 1977 elections and resurgence as the supreme leader when she took oath as Prime Minister in January 1980, reigning over the hearts of millions of Indians, brings an unprejudiced insight into the subconscious values, fears, and beliefs that define the enigmatic persona of Indira Gandhi. The pragmatic impact her leadership had in building up India as a prominent, progressive nation with a global perspective is eminent even after her brutal assassination by her trusted security officers. The sacred town of Allahabad is a center of pilgrimage, attracting millions of devotees who throng the city to wash off their sins at the holy Sangam, or Prayag, the site where the trinity of rivers Ganga, Jamuna, and Saraswati merge in unison, symbolizing the balance of centrifugal energies. The luxurious 42-room mansion Anand Bhavan of the affluent and influential lawyer Motilal Nehru, who practiced at the Allahabad High Court, represented the clout of the Indian intelligentsia, the liberals who hobnobbed with British lords and viceroys. His wife Swarup Rani was a staunch believer of the traditions and customs of their ancestors, the Kashmiri Pandits. Motilal Nehru hired renowned tutors and bestowed an impeccable education on the three children, Jawaharlal Nehru, Vijayalakshmi, and Krishna. Jawaharlal completed his education from esteemed Trinity College of London. Motilal Nehru chose a demure bride for him, the charming Kamala Kaul, who was brought up in a typically Indian household, starkly in contrast with the anglicized environment at Anand Bhavan. An extravagant marriage ceremony was organized on Basant Panchami, 8th February 1916. Kamala experienced a great deal of trepidation on her entry into Anand Bhavan due to the domineering nature of her mother-in-law and the condescending attitude of her sister-in-law Vijayalakshmi, who was extremely possessive of her brother Jawaharlal and therefore resentful and envious of Kamala's presence by his side. The family was overjoyed with the news of Kamala's pregnancy, and Swarup Rani expected her grandson to be welcomed by the customary beating of the thali. However, on 19th of November 1917, an apprehensive Jawahar who waited with bated breath along with members of the Nehru clan got a nonchalant response from his mother, Swarup Rani, who announced the birth of his child with the monosyllable Hua. The bewilderment, Motilal soon realized that Jawaharlal had been blessed with a little daughter whom he named Indira Priyadarshini. Indira was pampered by her doting parents and spoiled by her loving grandparents. She spent her time playing on the lawns, climbing trees, participating in the festivals of the annual Magh Mela with her grandmother Swarup Rani. However, this idyllic childhood was short-lived, as the enactment of the Rowlatt Act in 1919, which became a law to deal with the revolutionary protesters of the Indian freedom struggle, led to the tragic Jallianwala Bagh massacre on 13th of April 1919. The brutal killing of the 379 peaceful protesters by General Dyer infuriated Motilal Nehru, who immediately gave up his flourishing legal practice and led to transformation in the hitherto liberal Nehru, who now staunchly opposed the British rule and vehemently dedicated their lives to the Indian freedom struggle. Bonfires were burned of all the imported household furnishings, and the doors of Anand Bhawan were thrown open to the commoners as it became the headquarters of the Indian nationalist movement. Indira's early childhood memories were a vivid recollection of the Motilal Nehru's confinement, which was followed by Jawaharlal being arrested in the wake of the non-corporation movement launched by Mahatma Gandhi in 1920. The 4-year-old Indira observed an embarrassed judge prosecuting her beloved Dadu, or grandfather, in a packed courtroom in December 1921. When a police team reached her house to usurp the family's belongings, a valiant Indira broke free from the grip of her stoic mother and leaped towards the baffled policeman like a little tigress, fending off an intrusion of her territory. She refused to allow the policeman to confiscate her Dadu's guns, silver, and other valuables. 50 years later, Indira said, quote, "From the age of 3, I felt responsible for myself. Whether I was or not did not matter. I also felt fiercely responsible for my parents, for I thought they were defenseless and friends took advantage of their goodness. I had a feeling of wanting to protect something very big." End quote. Indira used to dress up like a boy in khadi pajamas with a cap and would delight in defying the guards who would prevent her from darting into secret meetings of the Congress Working Committee and settling in her grandfather's lap. Indira imbibed her grandfather's values, as was evident in a statement she made. Quote, "My grandfather once told me that there were 2 kinds of people, those who do the work and those who take the credit. He told me to try to be the first group. There was much less competition." End quote. She spent her time flying kites and climbing trees. Her room at Anand Bhawan was her haven of security, where she fantasized herself to be Juan of Arc or the Rani of Jhansi. The constant demands of the Indian freedom struggle and the commitment of the Nehru lineage to the larger cause of India's sovereignty meant that Indira's childhood lacked the security of a stable home, as the stress of the traumatic imprisonment or the fear for the life of a family member was perennial. The traumatic death of a second son born to Kamala Nehru in November of 1924 dragged her into the throes of depression. Her mysterious illness later flared up into a dreaded form of tuberculosis. In March of 1926, Jawaharlal, accompanied by 8.5-year-old Indira, took a frail Kamala to Geneva for treatment. Indu, as Indira was fondly called by her parents, was a self-reliant child and was confident enough to undertake alone by tram and train the daily journey to the L'École International School. Being the daughter of a cultured father, she had the opportunity to meet luminaries like scientist Albert Einstein, Romain Rolland, author and philosopher, and others. When Kamala recovered from her illness, the family traveled extensively over London and Paris, visiting museums, art galleries, and historical monuments. As her father disapproved of reading fairy tales, Indira was veered towards reading about Simon Bolivar, the revolutionary Venezuelan general who took on the Spanish Empire, Mazzini, the Italian nationalist, and his comrade Garibaldi. While her father Jawaharlal was engrossed in the resolutions of the Indian National Congress, he communicated with Indira through a series of poignant letters which encompassed issues of endurance, familial obligations, perseverance, and subservience of personal desires for large objectives. International perspectives were considered while examining domestic issues in order to widen Indira's horizon of learning. In 1929, Indira's father, Jawaharlal Nehru, was elected the president of Indian National Congress, and the 12-year-old Indira became a voracious reader, independently read out the draft, and committed herself to Purna Swaraj, completed independence from British Empire. In 1930, Mahatma Gandhi, who was like a father figure to Indira, launched the Salt Satyagraha, a movement aimed at breaking the salt law with Dandi March. Under Gandhi's patronage, peaceful Satyagrahis were to march from Sabarmati Ashram to Dandi, a village in Surat district around 385 kilometers away. Gandhi extolled the fervor of women as they played a revolutionary role by picketing shops selling liquor and imported clothes. Indira was possessed with an ardent desire to travel to Dandi to witness this historical event. The Nehru women, especially Kamala Nehru, astounded everyone by her tenacity and endurance as she addressed public meetings, picketed shops, and stood undaunted in the face of lathi charge. Indira, inspired by her mother, at once withdrew herself from the Jesus and Mary convent and with an indomitable spirit formed the Vanar Sena, an army of children aged between 5 and 18. She displayed meticulous organizational skills and planned with precision events like strikes in schools, distribution of pamphlets, etc. In an incident, Indira was made to sit in the backseat of a car containing secret documents, and she convincingly managed to persuade the sergeant who was checking the car to confiscate the papers to let her off as she would be late for school. Indira was bereaved at the loss of her dadu, beloved grandfather, who pampered her with showers of indulgent affection. Motilal Nehru was snatched away by the cruel hands of death on 6th of February 1931, marking the end of Indira's carefree, boisterous childhood. The self-willed and obstinate daughter of Jawaharlal Nehru was now sent into people's own boarding school at Pune without being taken into confidence by her parents. The alienation from her ailing mother and inability to visit her imprisoned father had a profound impact on Indira, who also took the family's charged financial situation in her stride by emulating the austere and frugal habits of her mother. Her mother, in view of the dwindling family income, sold off her ornaments and deposited the proceeds into a trust to secure Indira's future with respect to financial requirements. After her matriculation at Pune, Indira continued her education at Shanti Niketan, the abode of peace. Shanti Niketan was a forum for Indira's cherished union with nature, where she continued her study of languages like French, German, and Bengali. Indira was initiated into discovering inner silences and began to appreciate creative expression in form of art, drama, and poetry. Around the same time, Feroz Gandhi, a young Parsi youth who volunteered to assist Kamala in her political pursuits as a representative of the Congress Party at Allahabad, proposed marriage to Indira. However, she declined it as too frivolous of a concern in view of the grave and challenging political situation in India. Her education met with an interlude as she had to accompany her mother to Berlin in June of 1935 due to her rapidly deteriorating health. Kamala Nehru's condition turned from bad to worse at the Baden-Weiler Sanatorium, and doctors gave up any hope of her recovery. Jawaharlal Nehru was released from prison at Almora in September 1935 and boarded the first flight to meet his critical wife. Feroz Gandhi, who considered Kamala to be his mentor, visited her en route, the London School of Economics. It is probable that Kamala discussed Indira's marriage with the intellectual and trustworthy Feroz, implicitly seeking solace in the hope that her daughter would be well taken care of after her impending death. Indira was barely 18 when she courageously faced her mother's untimely death at the prime age of 37 on the fateful day of 28th of February 1936. The traumatic and tragic death of Kamala Nehru inflicted a searing wound on Indira which even time could not heal. Indira had inherited a hardcore and indomitable spirit from her mother, yet she felt hopeless and rootless with an uncertain, bleak future. Jawaharlal Nehru was overwhelmed with a sense of obligation towards his motherland and took over the presidentship of the Congress Party. He returned to India immediately, even if it meant leaving his daughter alone in the moments of grief to fight her own battles. This created a chasm in the father-daughter relationship. During this time, Indira was drawn towards Feroz, who offered attentive companionship and shared warm memories of Kamala Nehru with her. Indira returned to India to find her father distant and emotionally entangled in a relationship with Padmaja Naidu, the attractive daughter of freedom fighter Sarojini Naidu. Indira, who was extremely proud and possessive of her legendary father, felt disillusioned and dejected and decided to return to Paris. It was in the romantic setting of Paris that young Indira finally accepted the marriage proposal of Feroz. Not surprisingly, she remained furtive about her intimacy with Feroz in letters to her father. She joined Somerville College, Oxford University in October of 1935 in order to concretize her father's dream as he envisioned her maturing into a dynamic leader. Indira had an unassuming personality, and to the utter surprise of her contemporaries, she fumbled as she was forced to read out her father's message of solidarity with China at a function organized by Indo-China League. Indira had an unassuming personality, and to the utter surprise of her contemporaries, she fumbled as she was forced to read out her father's message of solidarity with China at a function organized by the Indo-China League. Indira returned to India in November of 1938 in the view of the strengthening of the fascist forces and to recover as she was diagnosed with pleurisy even before completing her course due to failure in the Latin examination. She made a second futile attempt to complete her education and returned to Oxford University a year later, but she suffered with a relapse of the pleurisy. The civil disobedience movement in October 1940 led to arrest of Jawaharlal Nehru. Indira, along with Feroz, took an arduous journey back to India, a voyage fraught with danger and turbulence due to the escalation of World War II. Indira met Jawaharlal at Dehradun jail and revealed her ardent desire to marry Feroz, citing the need for companionship and to raise her children in a stable home. Jawaharlal Nehru was engulfed with a sense of betrayal not only because Indira chose to marry a Parsi who did not belong to the elite classes like Nehru's other associates, but also because the heir to the privileged Nehru lineage, who seemed destined to lead the nation to glorious heights, opted to settle for a mundane, domesticated existence as a mere housewife. Indira's obstinacy to discard family heritage and marry Feroz made her father relent. The marriage was solemnized in Ram Navami, a Hindu festival celebrating the birth of Hindu god Lord Rama on 16th of March 1942, followed by a festive celebration with the blessing of Mahatma Gandhi, relatives, and friends. The Quit India movement was launched on 8th of August 1942, and the Indians were determined to seize control of their destiny and nation. A massive rally was organized at Gowalia Tank in Mumbai, where the national flag was unfurled in Indira's presence. Jawaharlal Nehru's arrest in Mumbai had a profound impact on Indira, who returned to Allahabad to find Swaraj Bhavan, the headquarters of the Congress Party, sieged by the army officers. Enraged by the brutality of the British and infused with patriotic fervor to defy the authoritative British rule, Indira addressed a mammoth public rally where she was attacked by the police and subsequently arrested. This was a turning point in Indira's life, where all thoughts of personal gratifications were vanquished in order to surrender oneself to the larger cause of India's freedom. Indira spent 8 months in captivity, which served as a lesson in endurance and a voyage of self-discovery where she finally encountered her inner calling, cajoling her towards a higher destiny. Indira was overwhelmed with joy to embark into motherhood when she discovered her pregnancy, and equally elated Feroz ensured that she received the best medical facilities in India and brought her to Mumbai, where their first child, Rajiv Gandhi, was born on 20th of August 1944. Jawaharlal Nehru was released from Ahmednagar jail in June 1945 and met his grandson at an emotional family reunion at Srinagar. By 1946, Jawaharlal Nehru was the interim prime minister. Indira took a momentous step forward to occupy the niche created for her by resolving to leave Allahabad and living with her father in Delhi. As the gracious official hostess to presidents, philosophers, and stalwarts of the Indian freedom struggle, an observant Indira mastered the nuances of protocol, diplomacy, and political manipulations. The initial euphoria of companionship and marital intimacy wore off and gave way to ripples of tension, perhaps due to the infidelity of Feroz Gandhi. Feroz, a meticulous and accomplished journalist, was working in Lucknow with National Herald, a news magazine founded by Jawaharlal Nehru. And during this period, he got involved in an intimate relationship with a lady while staying away from Indira, who continued to live in Delhi. However, he was dutifully present besides Indira when she delivered their second son, Sanjay, on 18th of December 1946, in a complicated birth which even put Indira's life in peril. Rajiv and Sanjay spent the formative years of their childhood at Teen Murti Bhavan, which resembled a museum. Despite Indira's effort to bring up her sons in a homely atmosphere, enjoying the privileges of being the Prime Minister's grandsons, Rajiv and Sanjay grew amidst the grandeur of the luxurious spaces. They grew to love animals as they had pandas, tiger cubs, horses, and even a crocodile as pet. Indira, however, ensured that they were not spoiled by materialistic possessions like expensive toys and their other fringe benefits. So she sent them to a private school run by Elizabeth Gauba. Rajiv was soft-spoken, docile, and suave, which was a complete contrast to the rebellious, outspoken, and adamantly demanding Sanjay. The children basked in the adulation of the Indian masses whenever they accompanied their mother and grandfather at official functions like the fascinating and pompous Republic Day celebrations. At midnight on 14th of August 1947, when the world was in a slumber, India awoke, ready for its tryst with destiny. Indians rejoiced ecstatically when their motherland was liberated from the British rule. Almost numb with excitement, Indira stood in the background as Jawaharlal Nehru unfurled the national flag from the historic Red Fort. The dark side of the celebration of freedom so intensely yearned for was the partition of India that brought with its massacres, communal riots, and looting. Indira was returning from Missouri to Delhi by train along with her 2 kids when the train was stopped by miscreants and a man presumed to be a Muslim was attacked. In a stunning move, a fearless Indira jumped out of the train and rescued this man from the fury of the hysterical crowd to the safety of her compartment. Indira served selflessly in Muslim refugee camps, waking up at 5 a.m., helping out with cleaning streets, providing rations, etc., and coming home late into the night, often risking her life by confronting fanatic attackers. She rescued helpless victims of senseless violence, completely disregarding numerous threats to her life. The year 1948 brought with its shocking assassination of Mahatma Gandhi, whom she had always considered to be an elder of the family. It served as a stark reminder of the price that liberators of India paid for the sake of a better tomorrow. A deeply anguished Indira mourned along with the entire nation that was engulfed in the darkness of despair. On the personal front, Indira's equation with Feroz deteriorated further due to the humiliations he experienced while being considered low in protocol in comparison with his wife, who occupied a place of pride as the First Lady, presiding over all formal functions held at Teen Murti Bhavan, Jawaharlal's official residence. Feroz Gandhi was aware of Indira's inability to give of herself unconditionally right from the inception of their relationship. On being elected to the Lok Sabha from Ray Bareli in 1952, Feroz joined Indira and his endearing sons Rajiv and Sanjay at Teen Murti Bhavan. However, he soon felt claustrophobic in the formal structure of Teen Murti Bhavan, where the grimness of protocol had to be maintained. He eventually moved into an official residence, and his sons looked forward to staying over with their enthusiastic father, who spent qualitative time doting over them. The wall of conflict between Indira and Feroz created an insurmountable rift in their marriage. Feroz eventually sought solace in extramarital affairs and was at the brink of a divorce from Indira. The children continued their education at a boarding school. Rajiv excelled in his studies, while Sanjay, being disinterested in the conventional academic structure, eventually dropped out of the prestigious Doon School in Dehradun. The boys continued with their higher education in England, following the footsteps of their mother and grandfather. As the children were very far away from her now, Indira Gandhi worked ceaselessly, electioneering for her father as a member of the Central Election Committee of the Congress. She was a part of the Indian delegation as the Prime Minister traveled to USA and Soviet Union. Child welfare was her forte, and she established Bal Bhavan. Tribal dancers and rural artisans received patronage from Indira and Jawaharlal as a creative expression and lived their spirit. Indira was abreast of international trends and orchestrated the establishment of prestigious National Institute of Design at the serene banks of Sabarmati, Ahmedabad. Gandhi had revitalized the youth and was a formidable parliamentarian, as his eye for detail and the thoroughness of a journalist gave him an in-depth understanding of national affairs. Jawaharlal Nehru interacted with Feroz with a tint of conceitedness, which led to a failure in building a close rapport with his son-in-law. Indira was elected to the highest post of Congress President in February 1959 at the young age of 41, an achievement which speaks volumes of her political acumen. Jawaharlal Nehru felt proud of her and in a touching tribute spoke, quote-unquote, "At first, Indira Gandhi had been my friend and advisor. Then she became my companion, and now she is my leader," end quote. Indira and Feroz had major political confrontations which turned into malicious personal attacks on each other, on controversial issues like Indira's abstinency, which led to the declaration of President's rule by toppling of a Marxist government in Kerala in mid-1950s. However, the tragic and untimely death of Feroz Gandhi, who suffered a fatal heart attack at 48, was devastating for Indira, as the couple shared a deep bond of commitment which anchored them together, irrespective of the grave misunderstandings that they had. Indira immersed herself in working with UNESCO, and with an unfathomable spirit she overcame self-pity and crushed every impediment to her meteoric rise. Jawaharlal Nehru, under the influence of Defense Minister Krishna Menon, undermined the Chinese army, which vanquished Indian troops in the Indochina War of 1962. The Chinese army was stationed within 30 miles of Tezpur, Assam, which led to hysteria as the entire administrative machinery, including the district commissioner, abandoned their posts, being crippled with fear. Indira, enraged by such cowardice, completely discarding all threats of her being taken hostage, defied her father and flew to Tejpur in order to provide solace and pacify the Assamese who felt betrayed by the Indian government. A unilateral ceasefire was announced the same day, but Nehru withered away due to the scathing criticism by the media and suffered a massive paralytic stroke at 68th session of the Congress held at Bhubaneswar. Indira was his lifeline, and she served him wholeheartedly and channelized all his official work. However, the absence of a succession plan during Nehru's illness triggered infighting amongst his ministers, as there were plausible claimants to the prime minister's seat. Nehru collapsed at 1:40 p.m. on 27th of May 1964. The practical implication of Nehru's death was the disturbing reality of having to shift out from the regal teen Murti Bhavan to a small bungalow at one. Indira took charge of the Ministry of Information and Broadcasting under the Prime Ministership of Lal Bahadur Shastri. She always defended her stand on important issues like forcibly imposing Hindi on South Indians, even though it evoked criticism from the PM. Indira paid homage to her father's legacy by organizing an exhibition on Nehru's life and work, which was inaugurated at New York and traveled to Soviet Russia and London on its way to New Delhi. While Indira traveled to London for the exhibition, she spared some time from her busy schedule to meet Sonia Mino, an affectionate Italian studying at Cambridge, with whom Rajiv was deeply in love and wanted to formalize the relationship into marriage. In the War of 1965, when Pakistan invaded Kashmir, Indira had the audacity to visit Haji Pir Pass, which was captured by the Indian Army after heavy bloodshed, much to the amazement of the Indian troops. The shocking demise of Prime Minister Lal Bahadur Shastri on 10th of January 1966 after being struck by a massive heart attack at the Tashkent summit, which was called to formalize the ceasefire, paved the way for Indira, who came a step closer to her destined position. Indira was approached to take over as the Prime Minister by veteran Congressman K. Kamraj, in the mistaken belief that she would be a mere puppet. The fact that she was well-traveled and well-recognized by the political fraternity meant that diplomats across the world associated her as the face of India. This further added to her credibility as being a worthy leader of the future generation. Indira faced stiff opposition from Morarji Desai, a Gujarati mastermind in politics, who expected the coveted position on account of seniority. Indira superseded Morarji Desai by a huge margin as she secured the support of most of the Congress chief ministers. Indira took oath as Prime Minister, swearing allegiance to the Indian Constitution on 24th of January 1966, and this was the beginning of a new chapter in the intertwined destinies of India and Indira. Indira's proactive style of governance meant she dealt with multifarious problems like drought relief, tackled riots in the northeast, and decisively carved out the state of Haryana for the Hindi-speaking population of the erstwhile Punjab. She would meet around 500 people every morning at her residence and ensured prompt readdressal of their grievances. As a novice parliamentarian, Indira would fluster as deliberate attempts were made to interrupt her while she read out well-rehearsed scripts. Indira called upon President Charles de Gaulle at Paris, who was impressed by her conduct. She visited President Lyndon Johnson, who extended cooperation and released food aid. Indira resolved to steer India towards self-reliance and was the architect of the Green Revolution, which led to the use of fertilizers and mechanization of agriculture. The White Revolution, which brought about self-sufficiency by increasing the production of milk, targeted the problem of malnutrition. Indira firmly believed that a nation's strength ultimately consists of what it can do on its own and not in what it can borrow from others. With firmness, she executed the controversial devaluation of the Indian rupee on the advice of International Monetary Fund. As she addressed a public rally campaigning for the elections of 1967, a stone was hurled at her, inflicting a wound on her nose. Displaying exemplary resilience, she used her sari to soak up the blood and continued interacting with the stunned crowd. Indira won the elections of 1967 and entered the Prime Minister's office on the 20th of January 1968, exuding energy and confidence at the prime age of 47. Within a month, her elder son Rajiv, who was now a pilot with the Indian Airlines, tied the knot with his soulmate and companion Sonia Mino on the 25th of February 1968 at their residence, Safdarjung Road. The marriage was registered by a magistrate and solemnized in simplicity. Rajiv and Sonia were blessed with a son, Rahul, who was born in 1970, and a beautiful daughter, Priyanka, born a year later on 12th of January 1972. Indira glowed with pride as she doted over her grandchildren and loved playing word games with them. Indira relieved Morarji Desai and took charge of the finance ministry to discourage others from inviting her wrath. The much-acclaimed nationalization of banks was credited to Finance Minister Indira Gandhi. Due to irreconcilable differences, the syndicate expelled Indira from the Congress on 1st of November 1969. Indira was sworn in as the Prime Minister for a second time after elections held in February of 1971. She was hailed by the public as she chanted Garibi Hatao, promising the masses emancipation from the curse of poverty. One of the challenges Indira faced as a Prime Minister was the crisis that originated across the border due to elections in Pakistan. In the election of the Pakistan National Assembly, majority seats were won by Awami League of Sheikh Mujib-ur-Rahman of East Pakistan. Refusing to accept the mandate, President Yahya Khan sent troops to brutally massacre innocent people who demanded a government chosen in the polls. The exodus of millions of refugees into India led to enormous economic and social burden. Despite repeated appeals, the international community chose to ignore the issues due to US President R. Nixon's antagonistic and condescending attitude towards India and Indira. On 4th of December 1971, Indira Gandhi declared war to liberate East Pakistan. The Indian Army, led by General S. Manekshaw, along with members of Mukti Bahini, a revolutionary outfit of East Bengal, strategized the Indian victory. The US exerted pressure on the Indian side by ordering the 7th Fleet into Indian waters, but so vociferous was the Indian attack that the Pakistanis were battered. They retreated and surrendered even before the 7th Fleet arrived. The entire nation, cutting across party lines, rallied behind the Prime Minister, who now entrenched herself in the minds of the masses as Durga, the invincible goddess, valiantly destroying evil forces to preserve justice. Indira displayed equanimity in the midst of the euphoria of victory and declared a ceasefire in the battleground in West Pakistan to avoid the escalation of the situation into a world war. Indira received a standing ovation in the parliament and stood tall as the world leader, respected for her stature and impeccable integrity. The success of the Shimala Agreement with the President of Pakistan, Zulfikar Ali Bhutto, was a feather in her cap as she reiterated her commitment towards peace while preserving national pride. The period between 1973 and 1975 was a turbulent period due to the cessation of U.S. food aid, economic burden of the war, inflationary pressures, etc. The only exception to this dismal state of affairs was Indira's successful foray into harnessing nuclear power. When Indira Gandhi directed scientists at the Bhabha Atomic Research Center to conduct India's first nuclear test at Pokhran, Rajasthan on 7th of September 1974. Gujarat was in turmoil on account of a violent agitation supported by Jaiprakash Narain against Chiman Bhai Patel's corrupt government. A massive railways workers' strike, masterminded by the union leader George Ferdinand, was crushed with stringent penalties against the culprits. Indira was the target of a malicious campaign accusing her government of blatant nepotism in the controversial Maruti project, a venture promoted by her younger son, Sanjay Gandhi. The opposition exposed irregularities in sanctioning of land, obtaining credit from nationalized banks, and mismanagement, which ultimately led to directives to cut off further supply of funds. The Prime Minister shrouded herself in an impregnable wall of secrecy, alarmed by the rumors of a conspiracy to destroy her, while further alienating her well-wishers due to arrogance stemming from the victory. Sanjay's disclosure about his love affairs further aggravated Indira's volatile mental framework. Indira, who in normal circumstances wished to find a demure Kashmiri bride for Sanjay, was perturbed to be informed that Sanjay had set his mind on marrying Manika Anand, whose father was a Sikh colonel serving in the Indian Army. Sanjay's wedding on 23rd of September 1974 was a private affair and was made public by writing letters seeking blessing from his family and friends. In an out-of-blue catastrophic development, a suit filled with Indira's defeated opponent Rajbhandari pertaining of fabricated changes of technical malpractices which led to her unanimous victory in February of 1971 was judged against her on 12th of June 1975. The Allahabad judgment nullified Indira's election and she was barred from holding office for 6 years. A massive public rally was mobilized by J.P. Narayan and Morarji Desai, instigating the police and army to defy her orders, thus posing a grim threat to the law and order situation of the country. Indira Gandhi sought the advice of Siddharth Shankar Ray, the education minister who prescribed the imposition of emergency laws on account of an internal crisis on 25th of June 1975. President Farukhuddin Ali gave his approval on the assurance and the declaration would be ratified by the cabinet. A stunned nation watched with disbelief the horrific measures that fortified their fundamental rights and led to mass arrests, other atrocities which included complete censorship of the press. Television bulletins were broadcasted after the approval of Prime Minister and electricity was cut off to newspaper offices. Sanjay Gandhi, Indira's younger son, who was her primary advisor and trusted confidant, authoritatively controlled the bureaucracy with an air of arrogance, turning a democracy into monarchy. The censorship meant international journalists were asked to leave the country, tarnishing India's image. J.P. Narayan, Morarji Desai, George Ferdinand, and other critics were arrested by a savage Indira, overriding fundamental rights in an unparalleled manner. 85-year-old freedom fighter Bhimsen Sachar wrote an open letter to the Prime Minister, conveying anguish and distress at the unconstitutional, authoritarian, and dictatorial suppression of the fundamental rights of speech and freedom of press. On 25th of July, all the senior citizens who were signatories to the letter were arrested. Indira was betraying the very ethics which defined the integrity of Jawaharlal Nehru. Though it was expected that Indira would lift the emergency on 15th of August 1975, she was mortified by insecurity and dismay when she heard of the brutal assassination of Sheikh Mujib-ur-Rahman, the Prime Minister of Bangladesh, along with his family at dawn on 15th of August. She had been warned about similar plots being hatched for her as the next target by R.N. Kao, chief of the Research and Analysis Wing, RAW. Indira was so overwhelmed by mental turmoil that she came under the influence of tantrics, alchemists, and astrologers who predicted doom unless Sanjay's proximity to Indira ended. Sanjay, a young at barely 29, was dynamic and felt red tapism must be avoided and the Indian economy must bounce out of the vicious circles of poverty and overpopulation rapidly, whatever may be the cost. With complete disregard for psychological counseling, men were forcibly sterilized and the entire government machinery went berserk, recruiting men for vasectomy, taking the number of cases to a mind-boggling 1,75,06,964 in 2 years from 1975 to 1977. An over-ambitious beautification drive meant that orders were given to demolish refugee colonies encroached upon public land around monuments. The urgency of the operation was flabbergasting as the hutments were demolished with insensitivity to the hardships caused by heavy flooding. Thoughtless demolitions of heritage structures in the ancient city of Varanasi outraged the public. Indira was alienated from the resentment of the public due to the sycophancy of her ministers who filtered the disturbing outcry. On 18th of January 1977, Indira took a momentous decision to release all opposition leaders and hold elections on the 19th of March. Indira campaigned relentlessly for over 5 weeks and intuitively realized that the twinkle of admiration in her eyes of the public had given way to disillusionment with her government and a stoic resolve to bring about changes. The turmoil of the emergency, especially the vasectomy, had engulfed the mind of the public in a wildfire of hatred that penetrated deep in the psyche of the wide expanse of Indian humanity, which equated virility with manhood. The unprecedented defeat of the Congress Party, which won only a single seat in all of the Uttar Pradesh, Madhya Pradesh, Bihar, and Haryana, was numbing. Indira herself was defeated by Rajbhandari, who, capitalizing on the Indira's disfavor with masses, projected himself as the son of the soil. The grace and the dignity with which Indira, the supreme authority who always hogged the limelight, accepted defeat, was an example of immense strength. Indira's political career was deemed to have hit a dead end, burying her into the depths of obscurity. Rajiv, who had strongly disapproved of the emergency, personally held Sanjay responsible for his mother's humiliating downslide from the pinnacle of power and authority. Indira's defeat in the parliamentary elections and ceasing to be the prime minister meant she had to search for alternative accommodation, as the present Janata government was adamant on dislodging her. The frills in form of furnitures, servants, etc. were all skimmed away. Unable to afford the rent demanded, she shifted to rather cramped a setting of 12 Willingdon Crescent. The Janata government unleashed a fierce onslaught of travails, beginning with a malicious propaganda, and set up the Shah Commission inquiry into all the excess of emergency. Indira and her son Sanjay were the target of palpable antagonism of the present ministers, who were seething with the desire to take revenge of their past arrests. The Janata government arrested Indira on flimsy charges pertaining to use of jeeps in elections, even without a proper warrant, and she was later unconditionally released by the magistrate for want of documentary evidence. Indira was now elevated to a position of martyr in the eye of common man, who was appalled at the Janata government's mission to annihilate Indira Gandhi in person rather than undoing the undemocratic measures instituted by her. Indira now traveled across India in order to reconnect with the masses at the grassroots. She garnered support from the array of devoted supporters in Gujarat and experienced the fury of angry, protesting mobs who vandalized the train in which she was traveling en route Kanchipuram to seek the blessing of the spiritual Shankaracharya of Kamakoti Math. The personal vendetta of the Janata government against Indira Gandhi was now resulted in pressure tactics and threats to her former supporters to testify against her in the courts of law. This led to her resignation from the Congress Working Committee and the subsequent expulsion of Indira from the Congress itself. Indira, wounded deeply at the hurtful expulsion after having served as a member for over 40 years, on 3rd of January 1978, carved out the Congress one with the palm as its symbol, figuratively denoting blessings. The atmosphere at Indira's home was politically charged due to ceaseless activity, ranging from CBI officers interrogating her at the behest of her sinister prosecutors, aggravated commoners approaching her for readdressal, to Sanjay strategizing the future course of action in consultation with his lawyers, much to the annoyance of Rajiv, who deplored the ominous meetings and the ensuing lack of privacy. Tensions cropped between her daughter-in-law due to extreme differences in their conditioning and mental makeup, thereby tearing Indira apart. Sonia was concerned about the effects of the chaotic environment would have had on the safety and growth of her children. Manika took the challenges in her stride but flared up as Sanjay was under pressure due to the changed political equation. Politically speaking, the next battleground for Indira was the election at Azamgarh, Uttar Pradesh. Indira personally nominated her candidate, Mohsina Kidiwai, a Muslim woman belonging to a family of staunch Congress supporters. Indira relentlessly campaigned for over 14 hours a day and appealed to the Harijans and landless laborers. Indira's uncanny shrewdness of political calculations was evident in Mohsina Kidwai's landslide victory. The Janata government's loss of prestige due to Azamgarh defeat pushed them into panic mode, and they squashed Sanjay Gandhi's bail in one of the cases pertaining to the emergency and imprisoned him at Tihar jail. Indira Gandhi was hemmed in by fears of her son being tortured in prison and the various threats of her disenfranchisement proposed by the Janata government. Indira visited Chikmagalur, literally meaning the abode of younger daughter, and the warm felicitation she received from the local population who addressed her as Indira Ma melted her heart. The probability of victory was higher in this constituency dominated by women, especially because a majority of households were still below poverty line. Chikmagalur took center stage in Indira's political reincarnation. The opposition parties disrupted her canvassing by organizing stone pelting and roadblocks. However, Indira outmaneuvered them by disguising herself as a nun and traveling in a shambled car. The electorate empathized with a frail, widowed woman waging a lonely battle against a vindictive and chauvinistic government hell-bent on intimidating her in a labyrinth of woes. Indira won the Chikmagalur election with the lead of 70,000 votes. Indira entered the parliament and got a hostile reception from the ruling party and reiterated amidst pandemonium and furor that she had never committed any breach of privilege of the house in her reign as the prime minister. Indira was however held guilty and imprisoned at the Tihar jail on 19th December 1978. Indira drew upon her inner resources and her sixth sense to exploit the weakness of Janata government fragmented by infighting and jealousies, staunchly believing that everything is fair in love and war. Indira justified her political agenda by saying, quote-unquote, "My father was a statesman. I am a political woman. My father was a saint. I am not." The shrewdly manipulative trait of her personality came to the fore when she extended a hand of friendship to Charan Singh, who was bruised at having to yield prime ministership of Morarji Desai. Indira and Sanjay worked in tandem to execute the intricately designed divide and rule policy in order to create a split within the Janata Party. Party politics were dynamic and intriguing like a game of chess. And Sanjay made the next move by subtly befriending Rajbhandari, India's foe who challenged her victory in the 1971 elections. Indira intentionally maintained a low profile to eliminate traces of her involvement in the growing hostility within the Janata Party. The special courts bill was legalized by President Sanjeeva Reddy. The incredulous execution of President Zulfikar Ali Bhutto on 17th of March 1979 traumatized Indira. It was imminent that she and Sanjay would be subject to a similar categorically ruthless persecution. In order to plan her next strategy, Indira immediately left for a holiday to Darjeeling with Manika and Sanjay, where summons for the first hearings were served to her. However, the breather at Darjeeling strengthened Sanjay's bond with Manika, who made Indira ecstatic with the news of her pregnancy. In a twist of fate, a high-spirited Prime Minister Morarji Desai, still beaming from the success of his Soviet tour, faced a no-confidence motion initiated by the leader of the opposition. Providence smiled at Indira when a baffled Prime Minister resigned from his post as he could not garner support from his party loyalists. Charan Singh was sworn in as the Prime Minister, and Indira assured him of her support in the condition that she would be consulted on major policy decisions. However, Charan Singh blundered by emphatically stating in an interview that the special courts would probe the emergency cases. Indira, true to her style, uncannily withdrew support just one day prior to the confidence motion due on 20th of August. Charan Singh, certain to be defeated, requested the president to dissolve the Lok Sabha. Life always gives one a second chance. This is called tomorrow. This prophecy held true for Indira, who brought her best foot forward to connect with the electorate in what was a golden chance to override her troubles. Indira traversed around 1,000 kilometers a day for almost 2 months, beating fatigue and personally addressing around 10 crore Indians. Displaying the agility of a person half her age, Indira, tireless at 60, awed by the masses who were impressed with her immaculate appearance in spite of her humid, dusty environment. Indira won 351 of the 529 seats of the Lok Sabha. Indira's government announced a 4-point agenda to reduce inflation, generate employment, conserve nature, and use alternative energy resources in order to reduce any friction in the effective implementation of the central policy. Indira dissolved the state assemblies where non-Congress parties were in power. Sanjay Gandhi, a dynamic and spirited leader, personally handpicked enthusiastic member to infuse the Congress party with young blood. He planned to challenge the old order by way of recruiting youngsters who were determined to achieve targets. This revitalization was termed the Cultural Revolution. World leaders were eager to meet Indira, a woman who refused to be swayed by the superpowers and stood unintimidated while being firmly rooted in national pride. A major change that stemmed from the difficult years was Indira's growing belief in rituals and superstitions. She took a keen interest in the powers of the alchemists, the influence of the planets on earthly existence, the protection granted by talisman, and the like. Astrologers made predictions of an unfavorable configuration of planets that reflected ambiguity and dark shadows marring glittering days. Indira was overjoyed to be a grandmother again, when Sanjay and his wife, Manika, were blessed with a son who was named Varun on 13th of March 1980. Indira Gandhi was requested to appoint him as the Chief Minister of Uttar Pradesh, but she wished to further hone his expertise under her tactful mentorship. Sanjay, so full of spirit of adventure, took to soaring to newer heights, taking flight in a 2-seater aircraft at Delhi Flying Club, often chiding away his mother's advice on exercising caution. On the fateful morning of 23rd of June 1980, Indira had to face the grotesque reality of her cherished son snatched away forever by the cruel hands of death, leaving behind a stunned wife and an infant son. Sanjay Gandhi was diving into a loop of his 2-seater aircraft and could not swerve it upwards quick enough to prevent it from crashing into a drain. Indira rushed past visitors to dash into her car and sped to the accident site, where she let out a heart-rending cry when she came in sight of the badly mutilated body of her son. Even in this hour of grief, Indira displayed enormous courage as she took charge and unflinchingly stood in the ambulance right next to her son, accompanying him on his last journey to Ram Manohar Lohia Hospital, where he was declared dead. Indira spent a few private moments bidding farewell after the doctors prepared his body for the final rituals. Indira wore dark glasses to shield her eyes from the public. Feroz Barun, her grandson, was a beacon of hope in Indira's overwhelming despair as she visualized Sanjay in every childish antic. Though Indira was very compassionate with Manika in the initial period, her effort to keep Manika closed involved in party politics upset her other daughter-in-law, Sonia, and thus Indira stepped backwards. She now needed Rajiv and his family to assuage her insecurities and share her burdens. Manika was always somewhat jittery about her mother-in-law's willful obstinacy, but she was lovingly shielded under Sanjay's umbrella. Manika devoted herself to the task of publishing a photobiography as a tribute to the memory of Sanjay. There were certain misunderstandings between Indira and Manika with regards to certain aspects of the book. Articles in newspapers highlighting Manika's political ambitions, certain business transactions carried out with Indira's known foes, and Manika's own insecurities, brought on with widowhood, created a vicious circle of suspicious accusations and counter-accusations, which culminated in Manika leaving Indira's house along with baby Varun, who was a source of great solace to his bereaved grandmother. Indira once again absorbed the grief and continued with her political responsibilities, aided by Rajiv, who was finally persuaded to join politics. Indira took keen interest in the prospects of computerization in India in order to keep pace with the international standards of progress. The country slipped back into turmoil as infiltration of spies was reported from across the borders into Kashmir. Indira's supporters in Andhra Pradesh caused the Telugu Desam government in Andhra Pradesh to topple, and communal riots tore Punjab, the prosperous hub of the Green Revolution. The Punjab problem had germinated around 5 years ago when Sanjay Gandhi selected J.S. Prindawali, a village preacher, as the emissary of the Congress one, which was sidelined due to the growing influence of the rival party Akali Dal. Prindawali grew into a formidable fanatic, breaking free from the party and openly demanded secession and the creation of Khalistan. Punjab, on whose sacred soil the Sikh gurus preached unity and devotion, turned into a battleground engulfed with the tentacles of hatred and intolerance. Looting, massacre of non-Sikhs, and assassination of heads of the bureaucracy were masterminded to create a stifling reign of terror. Bhindranwale and his supporters took refuge in the Akal Takht, the sanctum in the sacred golden temple of Amritsar, a jewel representing the essence of Sikhism. In response to the death sentences issued by Bhindranwale, Indira ordered a battalion of military officers to vanquish the militant contingent in a fierce battle fought for over 24 hours. Operation Blue Star culminated in the death of Bhindranwale, along with innocent pilgrims who were a target of counter-violence firing. The Golden Temple was completely desecrated. Indira maintained that the operation, aimed at dislodging militant forces and preserving the security of the common man, she vehemently dismissed the suggestion of replacing Sikh bodyguards amongst her security personnel, as she did not want to fuel the perception that her stand was anti-Sikh in nature. The gravity of the decision to execute the chilling storming of the Golden Temple had a profound impact on Indira's subconscious mind, who instinctively felt veered towards the reality of a communion with death. She symbolized a courageous woman who bore the brunt of ruthless politics, the death of a parent in her formative years, a stormy marriage, a humiliating downfall from glorious heights, the devastating death of a cherished son, the bloodsheds of wars, and yet stood tall by drawing upon her inner reserves to emerge unscathed. ready to withstand greater challenges without compromising on her convictions and integrity. On the 20th of October, she visited the temple of Shrestha, the patron goddess of Kashmiri Brahman community. Lakshman, a religious head who often met Indira, sensed restlessness in her when, in reply to a request to inaugurate a building, elicited to a curious response, quote-unquote, "I will come if I am alive." She was deeply concerned and obsessed about the security of her grandchildren and was tormented by the notion that they would be kidnapped, harmed, or hurt. On 30th of October, she addressed a public rally in Orissa, where a sea of people thronged to come face to face with their enigmatic leader. Quote-unquote, "I am here today. I may not be here tomorrow, but the responsibility to look after national interest is on the shoulder of every citizen of India. I have often mentioned this earlier. Nobody knows how many attempts have been made to shoot me. Lathis have been used to beat me. In the Bhubaneswar itself, a brickbat hit me. They have attacked me in every possible manner. I do not care whether I live or die. I have lived a long life, and I am proud that I spent the whole of my life in the service of my people. I am only proud of this and nothing else. I shall continue to serve until my last breath, and when I die, I can say that every drop of my blood will invigorate India and strengthen it." The morning of 31st October 1984, she prepared herself for an interview with Peter Ustinov, the British actor. She pored over some official paperwork, met her grandson Rahul as usual, and sprightly headed towards the gate of her residence, graciously folding her hands to acknowledge Bent Singh, one of her trusted security officers, who raised his hands as if to salute her, but instead chose to brutally shoot Indira in the abdomen from a closer range. As if to complete the mission to perfection, Constable Satwant Singh fired a volley of bullets that pierced through her body. Indira's assassination rocked the nation, which revolted from the dastardly act of betrayal and reeled with a wave of mass hysteria which surfaced in form of anti-Sikh massacre, killing around 3,000 Sikhs in 3 days. Rajiv Gandhi, her son, filled the political vacuum as he was sworn in as the Prime Minister late in the evening. Indira was cremated at the land next to Shantiban, nestled close to the resting place of her beloved father and cherished son in unison with nature.